Hello, in this video I will be making potassium chlorate from sodium hypochlorite bleach and potassium chloride and then using it to vaporize a gummy bear. To start the reaction, I first need to boil down a large quantity of bleach. In total, I want to boil down a liter of bleach, so I start by adding 400 milliliters of 8.25% bleach into a 1000 milliliter beaker on a hot plate. I then turn on the stirring and turn on the heating to the maximum setting. I insulate the whole setup with some aluminum foil in order to keep in the heat. After 45 minutes, I add another 400 milliliters of bleach. In this part of the reaction, the sodium hypochlorite is disproportionating into sodium chloride and sodium chlorate. This happens in two steps with an intermediate of sodium chlorite. The chloride ions that come free and form sodium chloride are reduced, while the chlorine in the chlorate that is produced is oxidized. After another hour and a half, another 200 milliliters of bleach was added and the solution continued to concentrate down. Finally, after another hour and a half, crystals had started to form. The solubility of sodium chloride is less than that of sodium chlorate, so these crystals are probably mostly sodium chloride. The solution was allowed to continue boiling down until there was about 200 milliliters left. After this, the heating was turned off and the mixture was passed through a vacuum filter to collect the sodium chlorate-rich natant. About 150 milliliters of solution were collected from the filtration. Then, 20 grams of potassium chloride were added to 150 milliliters of deionized water, and heating and stirring were used to try and get it to dissolve. I noticed that even with a lot of stirring and heating, the solids wouldn't all dissolve. My guess is that there were some insoluble additives in my potassium chloride that wouldn't dissolve, like anti-caking agents or something. I then combined the 150 milliliters of concentrated sodium chlorate solution with the potassium chloride solution. As I was pouring the potassium chloride solution, I made sure to leave behind whatever the mystery solids were. I turned on the stirring and I didn't see any potassium chlorate forming at first. This could mean the solution is too dilute for it to precipitate. I then turned on the heat to boil off a bit more water. Additionally, I added a bit of the solids I separated earlier because after testing it, I found it contained a significant amount of sodium chlorate. After that, I heated the solution until I just barely started to see crystals forming. I then turned off the heat, removed the beaker from the hot plate, and let it cool to room temperature. As this occurred, the solution began to crystallize potassium chlorate crystals. After it cooled to room temperature, I then placed the beaker in the fridge to let it crystallize even further. After the solution had chilled, I carefully dump off the natant into a separate beaker and then add the solids to a vacuum filter. I then use the natant to rinse the beaker and wash the solids. I leave the vacuum filter on for a while to allow the potassium chlorate to dry. I didn't catch this on camera, but I then transferred the dried product to a beaker and placed that in a 200°F oven for a few minutes to let it dry out further. After measuring the product, I found it to be 30 grams, which corresponds to a percent yield of about 91%. However, there could potentially be a lot of salt impurities in this product. I then see if I can recreate the classic potassium chlorate gummy bear experiment. First, I add a small amount of potassium chlorate to a test tube. Then I use a butane torch to melt the potassium chlorate. Finally, I drop in a gummy bear. At first, it seems like nothing is happening and the molten liquid mix is just bubbling. But then, success! The gummy bear vaporizes in a spectacular flame. I'm guessing that the potassium chlorate I have is pretty impure given that the ignition was so delayed and the yield was so high. To purify my product, I could potentially do a recrystallization to get better results. Thanks for watching.